In this lesson, we will graph linear inequalities. The goal of the lesson is to graph linear inequalities into variables. When we look at these examples here, number one, y is greater than 2x minus 5. We've talked about graphing the equation of a line before, and for that, we would start with a y-intercept of -5 and plot that point. From there, the slope is 2, so we would go up 2 and to the right 1. And I'm actually going to put an additional point there, up 2 and over 1, before connecting that. When dealing with inequalities, we have to decide if it's going to be a solid or a dotted line. We will get a solid line if we have an equal as part of our inequality. So in this case, number 2, less than or equal to, that's going to give us a solid line. But when we don't have that solid line, when it's just greater than like this, we are going to have to graph a dotted line or a dashed line. And again, want to use a straight edge. From there, we have to decide where to shade. So we can either shade the region that ends up on this side, or we can shade the region that ends up on this side. And there's a couple different ways to do that. What I usually do is realize that this says y is greater than. Well, the values that are greater than this line right here would be the values that are above it. So I would shade in the region on this side. The other way to do it is to test a point. So we could pick a point on either side. An easy point to pick would be at the origin at 0, 0. So I would plug in 0 is greater than 2 times 0 minus 5. Then what I would get is 0 is greater than -5 once I simplify that. Since that's a true statement, the side that contains 0, 0 should be the side that's shaded. So we will shade that side. For number 2, we have y is less than or equal to 2/3 x minus 4. Once again, we start with -4 as our y-intercept. So I'll plot that. From there, since the slope is positive, I know that from left to right it's going to be going up, and this is going to go up 2 units to go over 3 units. And I make that point. As we mentioned before, this is going to be a solid line, so I'll go ahead and graph that as a solid line. And now, once again, I have to decide, am I shading this side or am I shading this side? Now, one way to think about it is this says y is less than or equal to. Less than is going to be below the line. These are the values that are less than or lower than the line. So I would be shading this portion. The other thing to do, though, is to pick a point, and if it's true, we shade that side, and if it's false, we don't shade that side. Again, if I pick 0, 0, now I'm expecting this to be false because I think that this is the side that I'm shading. So we'll see what happens. I would get 0 is less than or equal to 2/3 times 0 will be 0 minus 4. That means I get 0 is less than or equal to -4, which is not a true statement. 0 is not smaller than or equal to -4. That means that this should not be shaded. It is not one of the solutions to this inequality. So I will end up shading below that line. For number 3, again, we start with the y-intercept. Nothing is listed here. So I'm going to think of this as being a plus 0. So I'll start at 0. My slope is -1. So from here, I'm going to go down 1 into the right 1. And I could keep doing that. And then when I go to make my line, I want to make sure I'm using a straight edge. But again, it's missing the equal sign here, so it is not going to be a solid line. This is going to be a dotted line throughout the entire graph. From here again, one way to think about this is less than. This says y is less than -x. So I would be shading below the line, which means this side. But again, I would want to pick a point and test that. Now 0, 0 would not be a good one to test here because our line is passing through 0, 0. We have to pick something on either side. So let's say maybe I pick -1, 0. And again, since I'm thinking that this side's going to be the side that gets shaded, I'm expecting that this is going to be a true statement. So again, if I plug in -1, 0, this is going to turn into a -1, which is +1, where this is a 0. Is 0 less than +1? Yes. So this is the side that should get shaded. In number 4, again, I'm going to start with the -4, plotting that point. Knowing that my slope is +1, I have an idea that it's going to go up as we move from left to right. We'll go ahead and make another point. When we connect this, it is going to be a solid line because, again, I have the solid line here. This is equal to the line counts as solutions. Once again, if I think about the fact that this says y is greater than or equal to, greater than means it's going to be the points above the line. So I'm expecting to shade this region. If I again plug a point into this inequality and see if it's true, 0, 0 would be an option this time. So now I would have 0 is greater than or equal to 0 minus 4. That ends up giving me 0 is greater than or equal to negative 4. That is a true statement, which means that the side that contains this point should be shaded. For number 5, we have x is greater than or equal to 2. Anytime we had x equals a number when we were graphing linear equations before, we would make a vertical line. And we're going to do the same thing here. So at 2, our line is vertical. And again, it is going to be a solid line because it is equal to the line. So then from here, we have to decide where to shade. Now, above and below the line wouldn't be an option here. So we're either going to shade on the right side of it or the left side of it. And you want to think, well, which side would contain values that are greater than or equal to 2? Well, greater than is going to be this side. Okay, but just like before, we can still pick an ordered pair to test it. If I tested 0, 0 here, I'm expecting it to be false because I think this is the side that I'm shading. If I plugged in 0, 0, I would plug in a 0 for x. There's no y to plug it into. So I would have 0 is greater than or equal to 2. Well, that is false. So that means that this side should not be shaded, which means just the right side of the line gets shaded. And then finally for number 6, again, we're going to start at positive 3. From there, the slope is negative 5. So we will travel down 5 units to go over 1 unit. This will be a dotted line since it's not equal to, it's not less than or equal to, it's just less than. From there, since this is less than, we should be shading below the line. So this is the side I'm expecting to shade. But again, I can plug in 0, 0 here to test that point. Now here I'm expecting it to be true. If I plug in a 0 here, this is going to be gone. So I would have 0 is less than 3. That is a true statement, which means yes, this side should get shaded. Now for homework tonight, you just have one Delta Math assignment, and that is on graphing linear inequalities.